So Ms. Foxx is here, and as I mentioned before, she's on a very tight schedule. So we're not going to prolong this any longer. I just want to make a formal introduction. Kim and I, we went to college together. So she was an upperclassman. She didn't know me, I knew her. And in fact, before her name was Foxx, it was Anderson. But you know, it wasn't that many black students down at SIU at the time. In fact, we were all down there together. Me, Kim, Alderman Jason Irving, Representative Will Davis, all there at the same time. In fact, her husband Kelly, I knew him. He's at SIU too. Always been a good person, kind-hearted, worked hard. Bless you. Didn't give you a double one. Bless you. Be blessed. But I gotta introduce her because what she's doing in the state's attorney's office is not just about prosecuting crimes. Her work has caused her to become a humanitarian, almost a civil rights activist. We know of the indignities and the injustices that exist in the criminal justice system, and how we've been plagued with corrupt policemen and corrupt and biased judges for years. And people are resentful of the fact that Ms. Foxx is exposing this, and not only is she exposing it, but she's taking corrective measures to prevent it. That's noteworthy. I worked in the criminal justice system. 11 years I worked at the county jail, and I've seen people who were later exonerated and they sat in jail for a year because they didn't have bail money. Or they got tired or exhausted their resources and they had to take time considered served even though they were innocent. You all know we got family members that had to go that route. Or how people who have legitimate jobs and they lose their paychecks and their assets through the asset forfeiture unit, because the state's attorney is just trying to grab everything that a person has and not giving it fair process and looking at the evidence. You know, you could be right, but if you don't have the money to fight, it's useless. And so our state's attorney is working diligently to bring equity in the state's attorney's office and the criminal justice system. And I invited her here today because I want you all to know how hard she's been working, the challenges that she's up against. This is an institutional office that's been plagued with biases for years. When I worked at the county jail, I was there under Cook County State's Attorney Dick Devine and Anita Alvarez. And the work that we tried to do to represent these detainees and provide them social services, they made it damn near impossible. And then most of them have public defenders. And I don't have to tell you, Commissioner Sims can tell you, the way they fund the state's attorney's office and the way they fund the public defender's office, there's a gross inequity there. You don't have the same resources. So please give Ms. Foxx a warm welcome. She needs your support and she's more than happy to serve you.
Good morning. Good morning. Y'all are out here this morning. Blessing. Good morning. Thank you so much, Mayor, for that introduction. He took it all the way back. I was Kim Anderson down in Carbondale. Bless you. And quadruple bless you to you. It has been an honor and a privilege to serve as Cook County State's Attorney. And I heard some of the introductory remarks while I was sitting outside, so I just want to get right to the heart of this. This race is critically important. I know for the last however many months, you all have been inundated with commercials about me, about my record, and so it's important to me that, in the words of the great artist Jay-Z, allow me to reintroduce myself. All right. Because someone who has millions of dollars is trying to define who I am. Someone who has spent almost $10 million in this race to convince you of a narrative about me that simply isn't true. That there's this man who is the son of a billionaire who is trying to convince all of us that the girl from Cabrini is here for the rich and for the powerful. There's a man who is spending $10 million to convince you that I am here for the rich and powerful. And how do they do it? They have spent almost a year talking about one case. Almost a year talking about one case. And the reason that they spend so much time talking about that one case, and the media is spending so much time talking about that one case, is because they want our attention to be right over here. They want our attention to be focused over here, because if you looked over here, there's a lot at stake in this race. If you look over here, I want to give us some numbers. We're going to talk about one case, or we're going to talk about the 770,000 records that are now eligible for expungement in Illinois. Because of marijuana legalization. I fought for marijuana legalization before the bill was even formed. And it wasn't because I was somebody who was like, couldn't wait to smoke marijuana. What I knew was that our criminal justice system had arrested and prosecuted blacks at a rate higher, 4 times higher than that of whites. What I knew was that war on drugs over the course of the last 30, 40 years had seen so many members of our communities get locked up for things that they didn't get locked up, need to be locked up for. So I fought for the legalization bill because here's what I knew. And across the country, people were legalizing marijuana, but they weren't vacating convictions. And it was important to me that as we were talking about legalization, that we could not have a bill that did not vacate convictions or expunge records. That before that first joint was sold, that first gummy was sold, you needed to make it right for the communities that were harmed by the war on drugs. So I fought for and helped write the most equitable legalization bill in the country. Most equitable because 770,000 records are eligible for expungement. I walked into court myself in Cook County and vacated the first 1,012 myself. They don't want you to talk about that. Those records and those people who have those records, they're not on a TV show. They don't have a record contract. These are not people who are rich and powerful and have access. These are poor people who look like me and you. I went in for the first 1,012 of 770,000. But they want you to look over here. They want you to look over here. I want to tell you about the 55,000 Illinoisans who will now be able to get their driver's licenses back because the state of Illinois signed the License to Drive Act, where in 2017, my office stopped prosecuting people for driving on suspended licenses because they couldn't pay their tickets. Now, y'all know somebody, I know we good ticket payers in this room, but let's pretend like you know somebody. Like you know somebody who's not. Tell me the sense that it makes. You and I know that there are people who have tickets, who've gotten boots, who have to make a choice between whether they're paying that $400 to get that boot off their car or $400 to pay their rent. We know that people were making choices. And that for those who made the choice to pay for their rent or to pay for their needs, suspending their driver's license, which now means you can't drive to work, to pay for the things that you need to pay for, and then we arrest you, put you in jail, prosecute you for driving on a suspended license because you didn't pay the ticket. Now you got to pay the bail, and you still got to pay the ticket, but now I have you in jail so you can't go to work to do... But we've done it for decades. And so I said in 2017 we weren't going to do it. And then in 2019 the city of Chicago said, okay, we're not going to suspend licenses for failure to pay tickets. And then Governor Pritzker signed the License to Drive Act, where now not only are we not suspending people's licenses statewide for driving on a suspended license for failure to pay tickets, 55,000 Illinoisans are getting their driver's licenses back as a result of that. 55,000. But they want you to talk about Jesse. But we're still doing our math over here. 770,000, 55,000. I want to tell you about 105. 105 men and women have had their convictions vacated since I've been in office 3.5 years. 105 men and women who were wrongfully convicted, who we looked at their convictions and went back and did the right thing by them. Of those, there's 77 men and women who were wrongfully convicted by a corrupt police officer named Sergeant Watts. Sergeant Watts preyed on people in the Ida B. Wells housing projects. And I'm a little sensitive to people who prey on people from the projects, because I'm from the projects. And what I know is that people believe that people from the projects, no one's going to believe them or care about what happens to them. So what happened was he was planting drugs and guns on these men and some women when they didn't do what he wanted them to do. And that this isn't conjecture. He actually went to prison for shaking people down at Ida B. Wells. And despite the fact that he went to prison, no one had done anything about those records and those people who had also gone to prison for crimes that they didn't commit. And so my office diligently worked to make sure that we could start righting the wrongs of the past. And 105 men and women have had their convictions vacated in just the last 3.5 years. 105. And while they're trying to convince you that it's people with privilege and power, I can promise you, because I stood with those men from Ida B. Wells. These were not rich men. These were not powerful men. Many of these men had additional records. Many of them had gone to prison for other things. It still didn't make it right that police could plant drugs and guns on them. And these weren't people who had access or were connected to politically connected figures. These were men who were wronged. And I stood with them and in fact apologized to them for a system that had in fact failed them. So let's go back to our math. 770 records expunged, 55,000 driver's licenses coming back, 100 plus people's convictions overturned.
Wow.
But they got us talking about Jussie all day, all night. All day, all night. And I'm telling you this because I can talk about Jussie. They put this woman on this commercial and I could talk about her now because her case is closed. Her case is closed, ladies and gentlemen, without a conviction on her record. This man has convinced you all that somehow this woman was wronged. This woman who was charged with the felony. This woman who was offered diversion. And he's saying, well, she had to do too much diversion. What? It wasn't that she got a conviction that she didn't deserve. She had to do some extra things because we'd offered her a chance to not even have her case come into court. But she did everything that she was required to do. And guess what? Her case was closed without a finding. That woman was never convicted of a crime. But this is what we call the okie doke. That they put her in this commercial. And I want to be clear, this man had not practiced law for 7 years. He had not been in a courtroom since he left the courtroom in the state's attorney's office. He read about this woman in the newspaper. He went and found her. She didn't come find him. And then he put her in a commercial. And he did that for a special reason. He did that to put a black face against another black face. You should be insulted by that. You should be insulted that they believe that the way that they can talk about this race is to try to manipulate our communities and pit us one against another. That is an insult to me. What has he said about the record that he wants to bring to this office? I'll tell you what he says. He says all the things I've already said and done. He is not trying to move this forward. When somebody's trying to put $10 million into a race, and I'm gonna tell you, I'm a public servant. This job don't pay that much. You have to ask yourself what's in it. Why do they want it so bad? I'm gonna tell you why I want this work.
That's right.
I do this job, I ran for this job because I come from Cabrini. I ran for this job because my mother was a high school dropout, teenage mother who had 2 kids who struggled every day to make sure that we had opportunity. I was not the best and brightest of Cabrini. I'm fortunate. What I know is that there were a lot of young people who we lost to violence, who we lost to jails, who were just as talented, more so than I am. And so I feel like I have survivor's remorse. That I have made it and I have been completely blessed in my life, but I can't leave people behind me. That every time I see someone who is lost to violence, I think of what we are missing. Because if you would have told my mother that the first black woman elected to be Cook County State's Attorney would have came from 624 West Division, she wouldn't have believed you. So every time we lose somebody to violence, whatever neighborhood in, we're losing as a society. That's why I do this work. I care about violent crime. They want to tell you that I don't care about prosecuting low-level offenses. Actually, I do. But you can't tell me in a county that has as much gun violence as we have, why we spend more of our time, energy, and resources going after low-level shoplifters than we do shooters. How do we do that? How do I look you in the face and tell you that I spend more of my resources going after people who shoplift? Now, don't shoplift.
Right.
Don't steal.
Right.
But Illinois has one of the lowest thresholds for shoplifting in the country. With all the violence that we have in this county, we spend more time chasing shoplifters because we treat them as though they are more dangerous than people with guns. Guns and shoplifting, the same level of offense. In Indiana, the threshold for shoplifting to be treated as a felony is $750 in Indiana. In Wisconsin, it's $2,000. In Minnesota, it's $1,000. You know how much it is here in Illinois? $300.
Wow.
That's why we spend so much of our time and energy on these low-level offenses, because it's easy. The mayor talked about our jails. The commissioner knows that we have one of the largest single-site jails in the country. On any given day, there were 10,500 people in that jail back in 2013. 10,500 people. What most people don't know, that jail was under a federal consent decree for 4 decades for overcrowding. A federal monitor has been watching Cook County Jail for 4 decades. Now, I went to Cook County Jail back in 1988 as a junior in high school for one of those scared straight programs. Clearly, it scared me straight to law school. And straight to being a prosecutor. But the reality is, when we looked at the jail, and I did this work working for President Preckwinkle, 70% of the people who were in that jail were there for non-violent offenses. Most of them could not afford their bail. And I want to tell you how screwed up the bail system is. The system was such that Jason Van Dyke, who was charged with first-degree murder and the murder of Laquan McDonald, awaited his trial at home because someone paid his $100,000 bond. At the same time, I had somebody in our jail for 6 months for stealing $300 worth of shoes, but he couldn't afford the $1,000 to get out. How do you have people charged with murder at home and people charged with low-level offenses in our jails? And so we worked with real intentionality with the chief judge, with the president of the county, with the public defender, and worked on bail reform that now the jail population is the lowest that it has been in decades without an increase in violent crime. But I need you to understand what's also at stake. Someone said to me, you know, you're doing all this stuff with bond reform and the jail population is shrinking. What happens if they have to knock some of those buildings down? Where will the people who work there work? They want you talking about Jussie. They want you, I'm not sure about her because I don't like that case, so that they can get things back to the status quo. Here's what I'm here to tell you. They're spending all this money to come after not me. This ain't about me. It's about the fact that if in 3.5 years, if 3.5 years we can go to legalizing marijuana, vacating 770,000 convictions, that we can stop prosecuting people for driving on suspended licenses and give all those people their licenses back, that we can vacate over 100 convictions, and that we can reduce the jail population in 5 years, what it took 4 decades to build up. They scared of what's coming next, and they should. They should be. Because when I heard that people were worried about jobs at that jail, it made me even more fired up. When I heard that we were spending more time talking about things that are silly, they would take the time to spend all that money talking about silly things and not the impact of this justice system. They're going to try to convince you that somehow me and Ed Burke are cool. They rather talk about Ed Burke and Jussie Smollett than a jail population that was swelling under a consent decree. They'd rather have us distracted, and I'm here to tell you, we can't afford to be distracted. We can't afford to be caught up in conversations that don't have anything to do with anything. The last thing I'm going to say about that case, because people are going to keep asking, it doesn't matter if I believe this man or not. He was charged with a non-violent offense and didn't have a criminal background. I don't believe our criminal justice system should be so caught up in making sure that we convict people and make them felons than not to spend our time dealing with violence. This man, if you believe what he says or didn't say, lost his job, has been publicly humiliated for the last year, will probably find a hard time getting a job. I'm not saying that you should be empathetic or sympathetic. My question is, what more do they want? What more do they want? For him to be a convicted felon? Ladies and gentlemen, I think we have far too many convicted felons from our community.
That's true.
And I know that those people have a hard time being able to build their lives. And I can't adjust. If I'm doing all this over here, I can't adjust and say you're not entitled to the same treatment that the person from the corner is entitled to. And I don't care how politically hot it gets. Because there's easy things I could do. In the heat of all of this, I could have simply said, oops, my bad, I'm going to fire somebody. But if I move my office based on political pressure or media pundits to do the thing that just makes people comfortable with, that defies our values, then you should have elected somebody else.
That's right.
I'll take the heat.
Yeah.
I've been taking the heat.
Yes. Come on, girl.
But that's how we were called the false confession capital of the United States. That we were so quick to try to make people feel good instead of doing the right thing. So, I need y'all to stay fired up. I need y'all to know that people are like, I ain't seen enough of your commercial. I ain't got $10 million. You know what I'm saying? My father, his father gave him that money. My father still owe me $20. Some chicken I bought to the potluck. But I also know that my Father above has got to be proud. And at the risk of being spiritual in this room, it's been a really rough year.
Yes.
They marched on my office with white nationalists last April. They had a press conference with a bunch of law enforcement folks that don't look like anybody in this room, and did a vote of no confidence. I had death threats. I had people coming for me. I had to move my family around to keep them safe. They want to pretend like it's about Jesse. I don't care how much you might love or hate him. Was it worth death threats? No. Have you ever seen a press conference, a vote of no confidence because of a goofy actor? No. It was never about that. No. And I will tell you, in the immediate aftermath, I thought long and hard about whether I would run for this office again. Yeah. Because I could go do a job that my kids wouldn't have to worry about my safety, that I wouldn't have to have my name in the paper and people doing these things. And then one day I realized that it was never about me. It was never about me. All of those things that I lived in my life were to prepare me for a moment such as this. And so people have said to me, my gosh, Kim, you look slimmer. Yes, I do. People say, my gosh, you look happier. Yes, I am. Because it is a blessing to be used for His purpose for our good. Blessing. I'm blessed. It's not about me. So I need all of us to mount up. I need us to go vote early. Let your hands be the first ones on those dots. And then wipe it off real good. I need us to vote early. I need you to call and text people. I need for that person who said to you, I don't know about this Smollett thing. I need you to give them the numbers. I need you to remind them what this is about. Because we can't afford to go back. No. We can't afford to go back. We've come too far. We're a national model. They're talking about us across the country for the good. They would try to convince you. People are laughing at us. No, they're not. That's why Bernie Sanders endorsed. Elizabeth Warren endorsed. Kamala Harris endorsed. Governor Pritzker endorsed. Lightfoot, Duckworth, Durbin. That's why we've gotten so much support. Because they know what's at stake.
And Mayor Rogers.
Mayor Rogers. The commissioner. everybody knows what's at stake. So I need us to be just as urgent as we were in 2016. You all showed up and showed out for me, and I didn't even have a record to stand on. I'm so proud of my record. And I need you to know that I lead with love. I lead with a commitment to this community. And that's my promise to you, that I will continue to lead that way, whatever comes my way. But I need y'all standing with me. So thank you, thank you, thank
was able to take a few questions. Keep in mind that, again, she's on a tight schedule. So anybody have questions, just raise your hand. She's going to acknowledge you.
All the way in the back.
Oh.
Hi, Ms. Foxx.
Hi.
Michelle Robinson Gibbons. I have a concern about drug dealing in my community. Just recently, someone on my block opened a non-licensed drug dealing place for weed. Now, we've seen so much traffic on my block. I'm working with my local police department. However, there's some concerns about safety of witnesses on the block. Can you tell me how you can protect the anonymity of the witnesses that want to, tell about what's going on?
So a couple things. So first and foremost, if you're working with your local law enforcement and you're letting them know that you don't want to be identified, that is normally honored. If we have a case, so we only come involved if they say they have enough evidence that they want to charge someone. Usually for drug sales, it doesn't necessarily have to be the person who alerted the police to come out there. They just have to catch them in the act. And so we make sure, and we have a victim witness unit within our office that allows for us to be in communication with victims and witnesses if they need some type of supportive services to keep them anonymous, or sometimes, on some occasions, relocation, we can do that. But it starts with your local law enforcement officer and you saying, listen, I just want to tell you where the activity is. If you get them there and then they see it, we most times won't need you to come in and testify. But our victim witness unit in the state's attorney's office can answer questions specifically about resources in your area.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Malcolm Banks. Thank you for being here, Ms. Foxx. Now, I'm a college student currently studying theater at South Suburban College. And I just wanted to know, in what ways and what words should I use to persuade some of my peers and or friends who are, I got a couple friends actually on midterm break, to get out and go vote? Because I got a couple that say they don't know much about politics, so they feel that their vote doesn't count. And I just wanted to know which ways and what words should I use to try to persuade them to get out and vote.
Yeah. Remind them who our president is. I mean, that tells you that the democracy works when the one side has more votes than the other. Right. Taking yourself out of the equation means that you not helping to move us along. Right. And in this particular race, I told you that jail was under a consent decree for 4 decades. If we not demanding accountability for what's happening, we can't get mad when just one incident happens. That system was allowed to build up and break communities for decades because we weren't owning our power. What you need to tell your classmates is that they have power. They have power. People have the power to say, if you don't believe that, look at what happened with Joe Biden. That man was on the ropes last week. They were like talking about he wasn't going to make it. And African Americans in South Carolina showed up. This whole national race changed because black people changed that race. When he won by that margin, it wasn't just that he won with such a big margin. What they realized was in other places where black people were coming, everybody was in trouble. And that only happens when we show up. Do not give your power away. Tell them they can't afford to give their power away. We have the power to change this country. Good answer.
twofold questions. One is, if you had a lot of tickets as a young person and can't get your driving situation license in order, what should you do?
Yeah, see the clerk and see how much you have. Also, the Secretary of State has the new rules for how people can apply to get their driver's licenses back. But start with the clerk and then the Secretary of State.
The other part, you used to work at McCormick Place?
No, sir.
Attorney Foxx, I appreciate you ridding our prisons of the innocent people.
Yeah.
I'd rather see more affordable housing built rather than more prisons built.
That's right.
Also, I read that for each prisoner, the state of Illinois pays over $100 a day.
More than that.
Now, where that money coming from? Coming from the taxpayers.
That's right.
Yeah,
So I would like to see that money go to something else more useful, like
That's
affordable housing,
That's right.
better streets.
That's right.
I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. I agree with you wholeheartedly. I believe that as we shrink these populations, that money has to be reallocated. You know, Commissioner Sims I have to go before her for our budget every year. And the question that I'm asking when they're looking at my budget is, how have we shrunk the jail population at Cook County Jail and we need as many sheriffs as we got at the jail? I'm not throwing him under the bus. I know. But we have to reallocate our resources. If we shrink the footprint, my goal is to only have people who are a threat to the public in that jail. Because it costs too much just to hold people for like low-level nonviolent offenses. And by the way, people can't work when they're in the jail. People are parents when they're in there. And you are innocent until proven guilty. Pre-trial detention is not a punishment. I think we get confused by that. Bail is to make sure you come back. I remind you, it's like bowling shoes. When you go bowl and you put your little money down, your goal is to like bowl, come back, get your money back and go. Not take your shoes. That's what bail was supposed to be about. And we were putting people in jail for things that we knew how do you have a homeless man, and this is a true story, stole $13 worth of soap. And they gave him a $1,000 bond.
Oh, wow.
And I wish I could tell you that was like out of the norm. And at the same time, you got somebody who we know is engaged in like arms trafficking, or someone who is part of a gang that's been shooting up the block. We got him, and we say to him, we gonna give you a $50,000 bond. $50,000 sounds like a lot, except if you know the cost of doing business is going to jail, you can make a phone call and somebody can get that $5,000 to get you out in a minute. How are we okay with people charged with dangerous crimes who can afford to get out, getting out, and people who are not a threat to public safety but poor staying in? We gotta do better than that.
Yeah.
And that's what this is about.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Beretta Knight. You were saying the people that's in jail that wrongfully, whatever,
Not all
of them are convicted. But what about the ones that get sentenced for over sentenced for less that should be out?
Yeah.
I'm saying that because I have one and I have a letter for it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can you explain that to me?
So there's two different things at play. There are people who say, listen, I am actually innocent. Now the reality is, most people say they're actually innocent. Most people ain't actually innocent. But what we do is get the evidence. What do you have to prove that you are actually innocent? What can we look at? So for example, with Sergeant Watts, we were looking at a pattern in practice. We were able to put together a profile to see if these things were present. And we were able to say, yes, we believe these people were more likely innocent. We also have what we call our post-conviction unit. That unit is someone who's been convicted, but something was flawed about the trial. Maybe some evidence came in that shouldn't have come in. Maybe some objections were heard that shouldn't have been heard. That's not about actual innocence. That's about my trial was such that I need a new trial. For people who have been sentenced and there isn't an issue of whether something was wrong with the trial or that they're actually innocent, but their sentences were long, we have the Prison Review Board that can review sentences, but we're also looking at our office of creating what we call a sentencing review unit. because we did see a history in this state of people getting really long sentences for offenses that they shouldn't have gone to prison that long for. We're talking about people not charged with some of our most heinous crimes, but we had in essence like 3 strike laws around here where people were going to prison for 20, 25 years or more, or life, for non-violent offenses. So we're working with the governor's office as well so that we can have a law on the books that allow for people to do sentencing review outside of the prison review board, because we believe that that's just as important. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Dolores Martin, and I recently received a text from one of my relatives that said that the state of Illinois had recently passed a law that it was unlawful to record the police without them knowing it. And if in fact you did record the police like in an act, you yourself would be charged with a felony.
That's correct.
So is that
Yes and no. So Illinois is what we call two-party consent. So two-party consent is if you and I are on the phone, I can't record a phone call, our call, without your permission. So me saying I'm okay with this call being recorded under Illinois law, if you're not okay with it, then it is illegal for me to record a conversation without you and I having two-party consent. That's different than if you are out in the public way and a police officer is exercising, his duties or doing his job and you are recording outside. That's not a private conversation that someone was not expecting to go public. Does that make sense? Two-party consent is really about people who I believe that you and I are talking privately and you are recording that and using that against me. That's against the law. You out in public and you view something and you see people doing something, you are allowed to record. That is not illegal.
okay? Thank you, thank you.
Yes, sir.
With the United States' recent endorsement of the Indigenous Peoples Day and the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, how do you see yourself working forth with the Indigenous peoples to aid the community of people of color?
Thank you. It's a great question. I think we haven't spent nearly enough time talking about the indigenous people here in Cook County, and they too are overrepresented in our criminal justice system. Oftentimes we talk about black and brown communities, we talk in broad swaths, we are also talking about indigenous communities. We believe in our office that we should be advocating on behalf of everyone, and making sure that our laws, particularly as they impact communities that have been marginalized and brought to the shadows, allow them to have the same equal protections. And so we've done things like fought the Trump administration on his public charge rule, fought the Trump administration on his sanctuary cities fights, and also everything that we've done when I say about marijuana and traffic, or the traffic offenses, they are also overrepresented there. And so we have a council in our office that seeks to talk to all of our communities, where we call it the United Nations, if you will, of councils, to hear those issues and concerns brought forward and being intentional about hiring those folks into our office. And so I'm proud to say that we got a small amount, because there are not many in our law schools coming, but we've been intentional about hiring them as well. So, I'm grateful to see that we're recognizing Indigenous People Day. I'm also, if y'all are paying attention to what's happening to the language around that, some folks talking about it's time to go to war, which tells you everything you need to know about why we need to honor Indigenous folks and Indigenous people. But those are some of the things that we're doing. They are encompassed by the work that we're doing, and we're intentionally seeking them out to be a part of our work.
Just another piece, knowing that there's a portion of self-declaration, self-identification, self-governance within the Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People. Mm-hmm. Some of us are still interested, connected, and related to the people of color. Do you see that being added strength to your campaign, pushing forward with those types of relations?
Absolutely. It's absolutely essential that we have those connections pushing this campaign forward. Everything that I've tried to do in these last 3.5 years has had a disproportionate impact on our communities of color, which is again why they're so mad, if I'm just being honest. Every policy decision that we have made where we've had long-term impact has been in those communities, which is why we can't afford for various members of our communities of color to sit back and say that this doesn't impact me, because it does. And so yes, we absolutely need that interconnection to be able to help push us forward. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am. I think this will be our last one.
Okay, first of all, you got my vote. You can count on me for your vote. I appreciate I came out because I was having some mixed feelings too in regards to what what the media is saying about you and things of that nature. So you freed me up. You can count on me with your vote.
Thank you.
But my question is about the homeless, the housing, and because there's a lot of vacant homes. I've been living here now in Riverdale for over 30 years. And with that being said, a lot of houses is vacant. A lot of people losing their home for whatever reason. And in my opinion, that can almost cause crime, in the area because of the vacant housing. And there's a lot of people out here that homeless, and in my opinion, I don't think it's by choice, but do you have any, anything to say about the homeless in terms of speaking on, as far as crime rate?
Yeah, listen, communities that are healthy, safe, and thriving have less crime. And so there is a real correlation between economy and crime. When you have areas of high unemployment, when you have areas of disinvestment, you tend to see more crime. If we don't invest, so the homeless piece is just an offshoot of that we have neighborhoods where we have unemployment rates for African Americans that's twice that of whites. There's some neighborhoods where we see the highest levels of crime where we have 50% unemployment rates. And so unemployment, the economy, homelessness is a part of that. What I've always said, if you are relying on the criminal justice system to solve for that, we're going to stay in the cycles that we've been in. And so we have been partnering with groups on the state, federal, and local level around economic investments in our hardest hit neighborhoods. What do we do in communities where the recession of 2008 and the recession that will eventually come again? What do you do for those communities that haven't recovered and people don't have money and are doing things like squatting in these homes? And many of them don't have a place to go. You can't just wait to arrest them and then me prosecute them, because here's what happens. I prosecute you, you go to jail or prison, you back out, you still homeless. And then you go squat, and then they arrest you, then they bring me to you, then I prosecute you, you go to jail, you come back, you still homeless. And so if we're serious about doing anything about crime in our communities, we have to be just as invested in the economic growth and development. Don't have these meetings that are just about crime without talking about unemployment rates and educational attainment. We need those things on the front end, because people who go to prison, I think there's a misperception. No one goes to prison for the rest of their lives except a small percentage of folks. And so every time we send someone to prison, we have to think to ourselves, is it making it better for us?
Right.
Because if you come out and you can't work and you have that conviction on your record and you can't get certain licenses to be a barber or a cosmetologist or a contractor, when we use our prison system and hobble people worse and then they come back to our very same neighborhoods, that's not helping us. So the solution has to be, what do we do on the front end? How do we work together and use prison as a last resort for those people who are harming our community and need to be separated from us? I want to be clear. There's some folks that just need to be away from us. And I don't make apology for that. But we've spent way too much time on the people that we need to wrap around our love and support and build up, and mixing them in with the folks that need to be away. There are two separate groups we're talking here. That group, that homeless group, are folks that we need to be working on the prevention side.
Excuse me, before Kim goes, I think there's a question that we need to know so we're clear. And I appreciate the fact that you said that you were not a supporter of Kim before she came. Give me a chance to finish. What in this meeting made you change your mind and feel like she's the person you want to vote for?
Well, a lot of things. First of all, she spoke of the fact that how the media is highlighting one area, and that's Jesse, you know, and the idea of that her component is focusing more so on highlighting this one black African American. And I've been around long enough to know better. You know, I'm sure most of us have, in regards to they're using us as guinea pigs to go against one another. So that's one of the reasons. And then some of the things Kim said that she has done that we're not aware of in regards to her office, as far as some of the people that she helped in regards to getting them out of the jail system because they couldn't afford it. These things that we don't know about, and which is why I'm here today.
So I'm going to ask you, as a person who was not a supporter, to call some of your friends who are in the same position that you were in, to tell them about the kind of person she is and what she stands for and the people she represents and why we need her to come back, and why I say, when we all said 4 more years, that's why she needs 4 more years, because her job ain't done. She still got a lot more.
Why I'm glad I came out, because it's funny you said that, because our mayor, which I never met him personally, but I appreciate the fact, I never met you personally, but I appreciate the fact that he informs this, you know, the community, what's going on, things of that nature. When I saw him saying out on 144 saying that she was gonna be here, I made it my business. I had things to do today, but yet I made it my business because I wanted to hear what my sister had to say, because I am a product from Cabrini Green. So I know exactly what you're saying, and God used us in mysterious ways, and I appreciate what He's doing for you, because you are representing all of us, you know, and we need to support each other, because it's time out for hating on each other, because like Kim said, it ain't about you, it's bigger than you.
It is.
What's going on with us, this is bigger than us.
But I also want to say, I run in a district of 300,000 people. She runs in a state of 5.5 million people that she has to represent.
Right.
So when we talk about us, even the mayor, it's a small group. So when people say, well, we don't see her, if you saw her all the time, she ain't doing her job. Me and 17 other people have to do her budget. If everybody say they see her all the time, then I'm gonna say, Kim, wait, when you doing your job? Because too many people saying they see you.
That's right, that's right.
So she is doing her job.
Yes.
We're asking you, I'm gonna ask you, because she ain't probably not gonna ask you. I'm gonna ask you for her vote.